As soon as we set the final shutdown period, we shaped the measures. We set up a steering committee with a group of people that represented the main bodies of staff, people that knew the business, knew what we were trying to achieve. There was a sort of double restart. We were coming out of the FIA shutdown and also reopening the factory. We were just looking for a framework in which to operate, and I guess I took it upon myself to lead that with a view to solving every single problem that I could foresee. As a group of people leading this preparation to return to work, we were genuinely trying to bring the factory back to life, some of whom, of course, would be physically working on site, others of whom would be working away from the site. So to come back to work, we had to make widespread changes. We tried to reduce the occupancy. A large fraction of the workforce works wholly or partially from home. We've got hundreds of people, 350 or so, working almost entirely from home at the moment, providing the kit, equipment and infrastructure so that people are able to operate, but that doesn't necessarily allow you to function at work. And for sure, it's necessary for some parts of people's work, even people who spend a large fraction of their time behind a computer, they also need interaction with colleagues. They need to have interactions with people whose job is 100% factory-based. Everybody who is working off-site is doing so effectively, efficiently, as a result of the kit and equipment and processes that have been put in place. Getting people in a position to work from home, it was a massive piece of work that was actually undertaken on the way into lockdown. Guys in IT did a fantastic job in moving us from a fairly conventional, traditional organisation with a pretty low rate of home working to a majority home working for people that could in literally a matter of days. Then there was also a great deal of work done by individual managers in individual departments, and all of the staff were very collaborative too. So in terms of the number of people that are on site, then in all of the production experimental areas where the work can only be done on site, we've reduced the occupancy and we've spread people out in time, but we're running at about 65-70% of normal occupancy in those areas, and so we've got a relatively larger weekend working pattern and a relatively larger nighttime working pattern than in normal times. We've introduced what we call a cohort system to split people into groups. People don't mingle between those large groups, similar to shifts, and then within each cohort there are subgroups, and again mingling is not encouraged. And then of course there are the physical changes in the site, again principally to achieve the distancing constraint. So everywhere that people are working full time, we've reorganised the workplace in order that they're separated by the guided number of 2 meters. Wherever that's either at risk or not possible, we've declared what we call red zones, and in those zones then we oblige the wearing of a face covering. We've got one-way systems with traffic signs. We've got signage to tell people where they are allowed to go, where they're not allowed to go. We've assigned people entrances, restroom facilities, working zones, and we've facilitated the way in which they work so that they have to have less contact than they previously would do with their colleagues. So there's a fitness for work assessment that we do, taking account of our individual COVID status. We've got a more draconian visitor policy. We've limited to an absolute minimum any external visitors to the site. So all routine meetings are conducted by telephone or video conference. Routine maintenance has been postponed, rescheduled. Where that's not possible, then we've scheduled it in time slots when there are no people around and we're requiring external visitors to perform risk assessments and demonstrate control measures that we believe in. In the event that symptoms emerge on site, whether it's a staff member or a visitor, we have completely clear protocols. We know exactly what to do. We'll leave the site. They will be tested. So far, happily, the only outcomes have been good ones in which we've We've had only negative test results from a handful of incidents of that type that we've had, but we're confident that the processes would deal if unhappily we ever did get a positive result. So PPE is an obvious subject, and in terms of how we've dealt with it, then we've thought very carefully about which areas of the site should be free from PPE. We've tried to make it such that the workspaces are rearranged in such a fashion that it's not a requirement to wear face coverings or face masks for anybody in their permanent place of work. If the tasks that they're doing require that the distance can't be respected, then we've got other mitigations in place, barriers. We've got subgroups designated, people working in small groups or pairs. We've made detailed risk assessments in every place where there's a diversion from the kind of site-wide measures. And this has been done with the support of regular health and safety team in a framework created by our steering committee, but ultimately the people in each of the functional areas knows so much more about their activity, knows what is going to happen and knows how to manage the risk of contamination. And one of the sort of key milestones was the first race. During the time that we were shut down, then the freight arrived back. Well, I think it arrived from Bahrain, but it had obviously gone all the way to Melbourne. First job, day one, back in the factory, was that the race team were on hand to unpack the freight and to get it into the production areas for servicing, inspection, and then into the race base to be assembled into race cars. Clearly, that was always going to be a big task. It's one of the things that is, by its nature, difficult to achieve the distancing. So it's one of the activities that received particular attention, planning with Rob Cherry, the race team chief mechanic. The managers and staff in that area all contributed to working out how to operate, applying the same principles, but to the specific task of building the race car. So we've paid attention to organising when the work gets done so that we don't have too many people all in one place at one time. When people are close to one another, then they're working in designated subgroups, and the duration of any interaction that's below the distance threshold is tightly controlled. The preparations for travelling to Austria for the first race, then the control measures are very broad and very intense. All of the usual business processes function, all of the goal setting, objective setting, the distribution of tasks is completely functional. In the individual teams, then the sort of the relationships are all working properly. We've been pleasantly surprised at how quickly we've managed to adapt to some of the remote working tools. So I'm absolutely sure that we're working effectively. There are some things that require us to be, a little bit better organised, a little bit more foresighted, both of which are good things that will bring benefit in the future. As we're now only days away from the first race, we're in good shape in terms of designing, developing and learning how to operate the car. The key to success in F1 at any time is teamwork, it's people, and it's delivering. You just got to be good at everything. There's no space for weakness, and you've just got to beat down every obstacle that presents itself. And you've got to be very humble about the fact that there are hundreds and thousands of talented people in other teams trying to do the same, and therefore you've got to be very aggressive and determined to be better than they are. So this team is a single team with two sites, one in France, one in England. The Viry site reopened a couple of weeks before we did, so to some extent was a source of information and inspiration. So we definitely took advantage of the work that was done at Viry to consider some of the things that we would do here. The practical measures are very similar, and of course there are parts of our activity that are completely overlapping. Everything to do with going racing is completely identical because we're operating in the same paddock, in the same racing environment. And of course we maintain the contact with our Viry colleagues, so they know what we're up to, we know what they're up to, and we share experience. As we've reopened for business after the shutdown and reopened the factory, then we've been seeking to identify the next levels of improvement, trying to get back to sort of full fighting fitness. It's about going racing. It's not just about coming into work.